News from this last weekend in South Korea. 2 miners were trapped in a mine for 9 days, and they survived by eating coffee powder. See, coffee can save your life. So tomorrow is Election Day in the United States of America. Let's get ready for some more chaos. Get your coffee. I returned Saturday night from a 10-day trip to Manila to speak to pastors and leaders at a conference in the Philippines. Returning to the States is always a bit of a breath of fresh air, but coming back to what we are just hours away from with a national election looming, these feel like tenuous times. Every year in the lead up to the first Tuesday in November, we are told that this is the most consequential election of our lifetime. People will say this is make or break. It's life and death. It's critically, essentially, vitally important. And yet, about a third of registered voters in the US will not vote. In fact, being that this is a midterm election and not a presidential election, it may be even more than a third that will not vote. But even if more than a third will not cast a ballot tomorrow or during this election cycle, a lot of people will bemoan and complain the outcomes. Honestly, it does feel as though we are living in consequential times. I don't know that it is life or death, but they certainly seem like consequential times. Perhaps I'm one of those people that is too involved in news cycles. I probably listen to too many podcasts, watch too many economic and political YouTube videos, and read way too much news. That is entirely possible. And there are times that I have to kind of force myself to take a break, really kind of a fast from the constant gorging yourself on like the fear porn of our news cycles. Doom scrolling through social media, Twitter, has consumed far too much of my personal attention in the last several years. And at times I can feel kind of the weight of all of the craziness in the news on my shoulders, or like a pit in your stomach. It's almost as if you wake up every single morning just kind of waiting for another major news story to drop. We are living in weighty and challenging times. This last week, the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States increased the Fed funds rate by another 75 basis points, or 0.75%. And at the beginning of December, they will probably increase those rates again by at least 0.5%. If you're trying to buy a home right now, and I hope that you're not among those that are, you are facing mortgage rates around 7%. And by the middle of the next quarter, they could be as high as 9%. Some speculate that in 2023, we will have double-digit mortgage rates. My generation, I'm like the senior class, if you will, of millennials, born right on the dividing line between Gen X and millennials. My generation hasn't faced double-digit rates. My parents have told me the stories about when they were just beginning their adult lives and 10 to 16% interest rates. So for them, this is kind of like Back to the Future, but a whole new world for anyone under 45. Inflation continues to remain high. It isn't increasing monthly at the same rate that it was 6 or 9 months ago, but prices remain at 20 and 30 and 40-year highs. In California, we are paying more than $6 a gallon for gas. Inflationary pressures mean that for my family, we've spent probably more than $10,000 this year on costs that we didn't anticipate paying for just regular household expenses. At the end of last week, the Bank of England warned that the United Kingdom is facing what may end up being the longest recession since they began keeping records. They are preparing for a very challenging, tough road ahead with at least 2 years of troubling economic headwinds. And then there is, of course, the war in Ukraine. It continues with no indication that we will see a near-term cessation. Energy prices are expected to remain high, if not increase, and there are potential food shortages looming. If ever there were a time for me, a Protestant Christian pastor, to say that it sure looks like biblical times, this might be that time. In the last 3 years, we have had pestilence, or really a pandemic, wars and rumors of wars, and now potential for even famines, you can open Matthew 24 and just kind of tick off one box after another. But Jesus' teaching there in the Olivet Discourse, that's Matthew 24 and 25, his teaching is simple and clear. He says, "See that you are not troubled." Then he adds, "The end is not yet." And then a few words later, he says, "These are the beginning of sorrows." See that you're not troubled. In a sense, when he says, "These are the beginning of sorrows," one translation says, "These are the beginning of birth pangs." In essence, it's going to get more challenging, more difficult. It's going to get worse. Not very comforting, really, but it is reality. Jesus also said, it's recorded in John's Gospel, chapter 16, "In the world you will have tribulation." We live in a broken and fallen world, and the effects of sin are more than evident. And it isn't only the brokenness caused by sin, but also we have the fact that there are spiritual forces, powers, and entities that are given to destruction. They are at work in the world. In the world you will have tribulation. But Jesus adds there in John 16, "Be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." To a people facing trouble and tribulation more than 2,000 years ago, God spoke these words through the prophet Isaiah to the remnant of the faithful in Israel, those who both believed in God and remained faithful to God. God said to them, "I will carry you, I will bear you, I will carry and deliver you." It is hard to trust such words when you are facing tribulation and trouble. But for those who are governed by God, that's ultimately the best and only thing that you can do. Trust. I don't know who will govern us in the earthly sense after tomorrow's election. We are facing a lot of political uncertainty now and over the next several years as well. And that is not only true in the United States. There are massive political shifts in the Southern Hemisphere following the recent Brazilian election. Politics in the UK are shaky at best. The last prime minister didn't last 2 months, and the new prime minister is promoting central bank digital currencies and social credit scores. So that should be rather interesting to watch. Politics in Israel are interesting. Looks like Benjamin Netanyahu is back for a third time as prime minister. China is certainly something to watch politically. And of course, you always have the craziness in North Korea and Iran. Look among the nations. Be utterly astounded. Just as Psalm 2, the nations rage and plot vain things. And in the midst of it, you have to pray, God, help us to trust in you and to remain faithful, whatever may come. Because the best thing that you can do if you are governed by God is to trust in God. Something to ponder. We'll see you all on Election Day.